The views expressed are not necessarily those of KSCJ and Powell Broadcasting Company. This program is not intended to replace the advice of doctors or other clinical providers. Consult with your practitioner to ensure the proper course of action for you.
Welcome to When Things Aren't Going Well on AM 1360, FM 94.9 KSCJ. This program is dedicated to your mental health wellness and brought to you by Family Services, a United Way partner agency. Here's your host, Art Silva.
Good morning, Siouxland. I'm Art Silva, and welcome to When Things Aren't Going Well. This show is dedicated to your mental wellness and how you can help yourself navigate the daily highway of life. Our show is brought to you by Family Services, a United Way partner agency serving the Siouxland community. Joining me today from Family Services is Chief Operating Officer Brenda Geisinger and licensed therapist Amy Small. Good morning, Brenda. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning.
You hear all that energy in this place already. Whew. Let's describe, Amy, what is your role at Family Services?
Well, I'm a clinical therapist at Family Services. My role is to work with individuals that come in and just need a little bit of support. I am always really humbled when somebody comes in and allows me to be a part of their life, because most of the times when people come into a therapist, things aren't going super great in their life, right? And so they're trusting me to support them. And they don't know me at first. Support them in this hard time and help them find their voice and find a little bit of happy.
And I think I'm pretty successful at that too, Amy. And Brenda, how about you?
I interact with the staff and kind of keep things moving along.
Yeah, chief bottle washer, cook and chef and all that stuff, right? Okay, we got it. Okay, well, listen. Again, good morning again. And we're going to talk today. Our topic today is getting out of negative thinking traps. So in going through this, you want to help define what is a negative thinking trap, you know?
So a lot of times the clinical word for it is cognitive distortions, or you might hear thinking errors. And essentially what it is it's an unhelpful thought. So it's a thought that makes you believe something that isn't necessarily true. Your brain tries to convince you that something negative is the way that life is, even if that's not the case.
That can really stem from something you heard while growing up the whole time, or it could be a current stressor that you're dealing with and you just kind of get stuck. It could be as simple as, I'm not good enough, or I'm really, really struggling, I'm not perfect, or they look so much better, that's so easy, I'm not smart, and it can just get you paralyzed in what you're going to do.
And I think there's different ways that we use them. So, Brenda is kind of talking about how we use them as a self-deprecating way, like I'm not good enough, I am not good as everybody else. And then there's other ways like that. Kiddos sometimes use them to make decisions that they know they shouldn't be making. So they might be saying like, oh, mom and dad aren't going to catch me, or things like that. So even though they know they shouldn't do it, their brain convinces them, oh, it's okay this one time.
Well, can you give me some examples of what cognitive distortions are?
Sure. So there is a big list. And I mean, there's thousands of cognitive distortions. If you get on your friend Google, it'll come up with a whole bunch. Some that are really common is minimizing. When we think about, oh, it's just this one time, I'm going to do this one time. For me, I'm trying to live a healthier lifestyle, which is super duper hard. And so for me is, oh, it's just this one Diet Coke. Nobody's going to know it's one Diet Coke, right? So, and then other things is there's a lot of generalizing. When you think of kids, all of my friends have cell phones. All of my friends are able to do whatever they want on Snapchats, whatever it is. And then there's also catastrophizing, which I tend to use sometimes myself. When something goes wrong, it's like, oh, it's the end of the world. What am I going to do, right? And really, when I calm myself down and look at the situation, is it kind of a bummer? Yeah, sure. But I'm going to be able to get through it. So,
Brenda, your experience with this?
I think there's also playing the victim, poor me, why is this happening? Nothing goes right. My life is awful. Like Amy said, there are just tons. And if you constantly go back to one, people usually have one or two or a handful. And it's really recognizing what those are for you and then how to counter those thoughts.
Well, Amy said there's a list, and I got a couple of examples I'd like to ask you about. How about what I see often is people is jumping to conclusions. Can we talk about that a little?
Oh, yes. And going along with jumping to conclusion is also fortune telling. So they go hand in hand. Like we think this is going to happen, or we think this is what that somebody's saying. We like to read between the lines, and our brain does that. If it's missing information, it just puts things in there to try to make it make sense to us. And so that can get us into a lot of trouble. And that also happens with trauma. If you've experienced trauma and you have missing pieces, your brain is going to fill it in to what makes sense for your brain. And a lot of that has to do with the experiences that you've had in life. So to counteract that, a great thing is to say things like, okay, this is what I'm hearing you say. Or, and yeah, other people than therapists use that line too, right? So, or like, I'm not quite understanding this, or, so that you get more information and you don't allow your brain to put those to fill in the blank, so to speak.
I'm Art Silva, and with me today from Family Services, Amy Small and Brenda Geisinger. And we're talking about kind of getting out of the negative thinking traps. And we're talking about cognitive distortions. And another example I'd like to raise is the shoulda, woulda, coulda, the shoulda, couldn't syndrome. How many people beat themselves up because they shoulda? Amy, you want to share something on that?
That one drives me bananas. And I think we all do it because the thing is, we all could have made choices differently. We shoulda, we coulda, all of those things. However, we can't go back and do that. So I think it's looking at where we are now. Sure, it's nice to look back and say, okay, if this happens again, this is how I'll handle it. But we can't fix that. We can't change that. So more looking at, okay, this is where I am. How can I move forward to still make it to my goal? Because we all have goals. We all want certain outcomes. And every decision we make makes us move towards or away those goals. And along the way, that's going to happen. You're going to have, times where you have a hiccup, so to speak, is what I call it. And that's okay. It's a learning opportunity. What didn't work at that time? How can I do it differently next time?
Brenda, you mentioned earlier the victim, me, why me, et cetera. Do you see that in children?
Absolutely. I think a lot of times, especially now with everything going on, they wonder, why is the world changing? Why am I stuck in this spot? Or why can't I go out and do what I used to do? And then you can start spiraling into other thoughts, the blaming and the shaming, and it just can go crazy.
A lot of times, there are things out there that are valid, they're not good. We got to deal with it. But a lot of times we discount the positive. Would you call that a cognitive distortion?
Well, it certainly can be. I mean, you can make almost anything a cognitive distortion, to be honest with you. And I think it's all about, I have this motto, and I know Brenda has heard me say it a lot. I try to look at things. I don't always. Sometimes cognitive distortions get the best of me. But I always try to look at something as a learning opportunity, even if it's hard, even if I don't like it, even if, as long as it's safe and things like that. But I have to do it anyways. I try to get in the mindset, this is a learning opportunity for me. And it just changes the not very fun task into making it like a way for my brain to grow a little bit. So.
When you kind of go back and you take a look at this, how important is filtering? When you're sometimes the horse is out of the barn before you really want to, get a grasp on what you want to say. So how important is filtering? Brenda, you want to talk about that?
Sometimes I like to say to myself, what is the story being told? And then sorting out, are we in chapter 1 or chapter 3? Did I skip something in there? And where are we at? And I think you have to filter, but you have to recognize you are filtering.
Amy, any comments on filtering?
I think Brenda is great at filtering. She has to deal with a lot of our stuff that comes up. And so I think that it's something that can be learned. And so for me, she's a great example to follow, because sometimes for me, stuff comes out right away. And then I'm like, oh, that probably wasn't the best way to say it. So I think when you're looking at any of these things, filters or cognitive distortions, they are things that you can learn how to do or learn how to combat if that's something that's going on with your life. So.
We're coming up on our break, so we'll take a little pause for the cause, and we'll return shortly with When Things Aren't Going Well right here on KSCJ.
Let's face it, that happens to all of us. However, the pandemic has compounded all of our lives and activities. Even the simplest tasks seem harder. Hi, I'm Brenda Geisinger, the Chief Operating Officer at the Boys and Girls Home and Family Services. Family Services is a United Way partner agency serving children and families of our community, and we're here to help. If you'd like to learn more about Family Services, please contact us via email, website, Facebook, or phone Mary Pickens. At Family Services, we change lives.
Welcome back to When Things Aren't Going Well on KSCJ. Here's Art Silva.
Welcome back to When Things Aren't Going Well. I'm Art Silva along with Brenda Geisinger and Amy Small from Family Services, and today we have been discussing getting out of negative thinking traps. So, what are some of the tips for handling negative thoughts? Amy, you want to take that?
So I'm going to take you on a little story with me, Art, here. A couple years ago, I was going through my spice cabinet. I was going through a phase where I thought I could make anything I saw on the Food Network, right? My fire detectors would tell you that's not the case, but I thought I could. So I had all these spices in my cabinets, and a spice isn't that big, right? But if you use it once, and they can fill up space. So I was going through, I was looking at them, and at one time, those spices were useful because I was using them to make the Chinese food or whatever I was trying to do at my little home kitchen, right? And so it did serve a purpose for that time when I bought that spice. However, it's been in the back of my cabinet, and I haven't used it since. When I think about distorted and thinking errors, what I think is at one time, that thinking error might have had some sort of use for us, whether it was to motivate us, whether it was to a defense mechanism to help us not be physically or emotionally hurt. It served some purpose for us. But I think it's important, just like my spice cabinet, I went through and got out of the stuff that I didn't need anymore. I think it's important to look at those distorted thoughts and think, is this still serving a purpose for me, or is it just taking up space? Because what happens is my spice cabinet got full and I couldn't try any new dishes because there was no more room for the spices. And the same thing with when you get all these cognitive distortions in there, you might be scared to try something new because you don't have room for that in your mind because you're so nervous or your brain is telling you, I can't do this. And so it's really important to look at those just like your spices and see, is this still serving a purpose in my life, or is it time for me to let it go?
That is such a great analogy, Amy. And life does change. Things do change. And what I like about what you just said was the fact it locks something new out because you don't have the space for it.
Yep.
So that's really interesting. I got one more question for you.
Yes.
Your spice cabinet?
Yes.
Do you arrange it alphabetically by height?
No, it's a Hot Mess Express.
That's the club. I think it's over here. Oh. Okay, well, let's go back. We're talking about some of our fixes for negative thoughts. And I read something on reframe. Can you explain what reframe is?
So reframe is what I'm assuming it is. It's kind of like the cognitive behavioral triangle, the CBT triangle, which I use a lot when I'm working with individuals, is you reframe your thought. So like if you're having a negative thought, you change it to something different, which will change your feelings and then your actions. So if an example, I walk into work and Brenda walks right by me and she doesn't say hi to me or anything. And I'm like, what in the world? Brenda's mad at me. I did something. Oh my gosh, what's going on? Did I not get something turned in on time? I missed a deadline, right? And so I'm thinking, oh my goodness, she's going to have a meeting. I'm going to get let go or something, right? And so then my whole day I'm nervous and I'm like, oh, and acting a little bit on the edge. Well, really, maybe Brenda got up late and, she's having troubles with
Bad hair day.
Whatever it is, right? And so it has nothing to do with me. And so if I reframe my thought, instead of saying, oh, Brenda is really mad at me, saying, I wonder if Brenda's doing okay today. I wonder if she needs to talk to somebody, or if, she needs the number to my beautician, right? And then it changes how I react to that situation. And so that's talking about reframing.
Brenda, you want to get your side of this in?
I think with reframing, it's a matter of just taking a pause and questioning yourself and questioning the situation and getting the facts instead of jumping to conclusions and then going from there. Another way to reframe sometimes is journaling and finding a gratitude or a blessing and really trying to refocus or reposition your thoughts around something.
Interesting. Another tip for handling negative thoughts, how about prove yourself wrong?
That can be really helpful. It can also be a slippery slope. So, and I think that when we look at any way that we're trying to prove ourselves wrong or to counteract the um, cognitive distortions, we have to be careful because it can go both ways, right? We can start going, and what if we find out that our distortion is right, right? Then it's how are we going to handle that? Most of the time, I would say 90% of the time, you're gonna prove yourself wrong. You're gonna look at the evidence, you're gonna calm down, you're gonna see what's happening around you, and you're gonna be like, whoa, I'm being a little dramatic about this. Amy, back up a little bit, cool your jets, and let's look at this a little bit differently. I think the first step is to identify what cognitive distortions you tend to use. And when you start telling yourself those things, oh, I need to take a break. I need to stop. What's going on? Because this is not a healthy thought for me. And going from there.
Interesting. I think this is something we can all benefit from if we identify that we have some issues along this line. Then, so these are all good tips. Just keep everything on the positive side. And speaking of that, how about countering your negative thoughts with positive thoughts?
I like to, goes back to my everything is a learning opportunity. And I try to look at even hard things as everything's a learning opportunity. We talk about, I'm going to bring up COVID just for a second. And I know we talk about COVID and all the struggles, and it still is. It's really difficult, but it's also given us this opportunity to learn how to do things different as not just a small group of people, but as a nation. How are we going to still get kids educated? How are people still going to be able to do work? How are they going to be mentally and physically safe? Like, it gave us the opportunity to come together as a nation and figure out what is going to work best for us. And I think that's super great. I would have preferred that COVID didn't happen. However, it's been a good opportunity for learning.
I think the other thing with, negative thoughts is people can be mad. People can have negative thoughts, but taking a moment and then what is going to be a positive response that's healthy to the situation. Life isn't all great and you are handed lemons to make the lemonade, but it's taking that moment. What am I going to make it in? How am I going to make that lemonade? So negative thoughts happen, negative events happen, but what positive choices can you make to deal with those?
I love that because lemons are a little bit sour, but you have to put sugar in with the lemonade,
That's
right?
right.
A little sweet and a little sour, and it makes a delicious drink. So
It's just turning it right around to a positive side, and that's a great thing. Do you feel comfortable telling somebody that they got a snap out of it, or try to look at themselves and maybe they're practicing a lot of these cognitives, negative thoughts?
well,
Timing is everything.
yeah, I'm a therapist, so that's what I do, right?
Okay.
But I think that I have some friends that I take it a lot better from than other friends. I would, if Brenda came up to me and said, you're having a vinegar day, I would take that okay. If there's someone else that I work with that said that, I might not take it as well. I think it depends on the people. I think it depends on how it's coming to you, too. If it's coming to you like, hey, you're looking like you need a little bit of a break today. Is it coming because that you're taking it that they're being down on you, or is it like they're being helpful and supportive?
A lot of times I think it's just upfront just determining what are facts and what are thoughts. What happens when thoughts are not facts?
Well, that happens quite often. And I think that sometimes you need help outside of yourself when that happens. And so whether that is a therapist, whether it's a trusted friend, whether it's, a colleague that you really trust, we do that a lot at Family Services. We staff things together. We talk about things together. We ask for outside opinions outside of ourselves. Hey, this is what's going on. And we have a really great crew there. And they're all, they're wonderful. I learn a lot from them. But they give information that I'm not seeing. And sometimes it's that, we get so set in our way that we're unable to see outside of what's going on with ourselves. So getting outside help is a great way to do that.
Well, this has been a great discussion on handling negative thoughts. Thank you for sharing that with us, Amy, Brenda. Okay, we're coming up near the end of our show. We want to leave you with a little humor, a little medicine for the soul. Did you hear the rumor going around about butter? Never mind, I shouldn't spread it. Well, okay. Brenda and Amy, I want to thank you for sharing your expertise with us today. Also, thanks to our listening audience for joining us this morning. A shout out to Janet Fett and the Sioux City Optimist Club. And also a super loud shout out to Brad Pausch. Hang in there, buddy. Thoughts and prayers for a full recovery. We'll be back next Saturday morning at 7 right here on KSCJ, 1360 AM, 94.9 FM. And our topic will be mental wellness in Siouxland. Have a great week. May the sun shine on you.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling until then. Happy trails to you.